Hey, I'm Ryan. This is my brother Daniel. This is Rolls in the Family, and we are here to count down another top plays of the month. We are looking at March of 2024, and what are our top 3 board gaming plays in the past roughly 31 days? I don't know about you. Mine is kind of an average month, I think, of gaming.
Average
for
in
me,
terms of
but
performance or number of games
as far as just like amount that I had to choose from to come up with 3.
Gotcha.
But I'm happy with my 3. We always will include the links to these games below if you see them and are intrigued, want to check them out. It's also a way you can support the channel. We also would love to hear.
Can I click those links? Is that
and then
allowed?
We'll get banned from the Amazon Associates.
Okay, well, I won't click those links.
We are counting on you to. We also love hearing what games you've played recently that you've really enjoyed. What is just a session that blew you away, knocked your socks off?
Wow.
Yeah. Like you're still recovering.
You better have finished that game with no socks on.
Yes. We would love to hear that below. It's always fun to hear what's resonating with other people. Maybe it's games we would be interested in trying. Maybe we just want to share in the joy that it's also a game that we love.
Yeah.
It's like every time we see somebody say that like they, like or are going to try Agricola, just warms my heart a little bit.
Oh my gosh.
In the comment section.
Oh yeah.
But let's get going. We'll kick it over to Daniel for his number 3.
Kick it over to me. Number 3 of March. This game.
I thought you just
I thought I froze there for a second. Yeah. I think I did mentally. My number 3 of March is a game that actually talked about recently on our top party games list that we just released. I'll link it above, I guess. And this was a game that got to play for the first time. My wife's family was in town. And so it really kind of, I got it like, I think a day before they arrived. And so it just coincided. I was like, man, this is the perfect opportunity to give it a shot. And this is going to go to Ready, Set, Bet. This one, we both have gotten recently, actually.
Yep.
So it's kind of new to both of us right now. I know it's kind of a hot one in the board game world, as they say. But yeah, we were able to play it. I'm trying to remember. There was, I think, 6 people playing, and then I was I was running it
the
as
house or whatever
the house. And we went full send with this. I mean, we got the I pulled up a soundtrack for like a horse race playing in the room.
You dressed up in full 1920s.
Yes,
horse, yeah.
Right. Actually, we actually were saying that afterwards. It'd be so fun to like even make it a party,
like a whole
thing.
night of it.
A whole night of it. No, there's this website that you can, I think it's called Melodice or whatever, where you can search a board game and then it's got YouTube music, like videos that are recommended for listening to during that game.
Yeah,
it's kind of a cool one to check out.
If we remember, we'll link it below.
Yeah, there's
it's a tough chance if we're going to remember that, but
maybe maybe I will. But anyways, so we were able to kind of build this awesome, theme of it, and it is such a fun, just the group atmosphere in the game is incredible. And I'll just start off by saying I love playing the house.
I do too.
Being the person that's rolling and narrating what's happening, and that's not going to be everyone's cup of tea, but for Ryan and I, we really like that. And I think it's partially because you're also kind of facilitating some of just the environment and fun. Totally. You're able to kind of control it, which is really cool. But it's such a great design because one, I mean, obviously everyone, you got the fun of everyone kind of watching and placing their bets and then cheering and all of that. But even I just think the design of how the horses move, I think is really well done.
Yeah.
Because it, obviously you've got kind of the center horse is the most common roll with like a 7. But the way they make the more uncommon rolls have the potential to do well if you roll back to back, because they have like the bonus, that if you roll it twice in a row, and that it's like, it's such a simple design decision, and yet it's one that creates for incredible moments of catching up or stuff like that. And that's critical in a game like this is big, if you just had all the same, all the same, and you're just rolling it, it's like, it wouldn't be that exciting or whatnot. But the fact that, hey, the 11 might be a good amount back, but you roll it once, and if you roll it a second time, it's going to shoot ahead into the lead, that's the kind of thing you need in a game like this, is these
if you didn't have
swings.
If you didn't have that boost rule, it would basically just be like a visualization of a bell curve. It'd be like, here's how dice probabilities work.
It'd be a great educational game.
Yeah, it'd be a good educational tool.
Great. Maybe we'll do that with our kids. We'll just take out the bonuses. And we'll just be like, this is how bell curves work. Which horse should you bet on?
Yeah.
You better always pick 7.
I mean, I agree. We've seen the least likely, I guess obviously those skew the odds because of the boosting, but we've seen those outer horses win or come back and win, and it's very exciting. I love how horses can get close to finishing and then just go through a dry spell of not rolling it. And we had one that, everybody was betting on these 3 horses getting to the end, and then this other horse just got going, and so it ends up winning, and nobody placed a single bet on it at any level because it just didn't look like it. And I agree. I also totally agree that I enjoy running it, but I think that's also one of the biggest things if I'm recommending this to somebody is that's the experience and the environment that you're creating is so dependent on that role. Very true. That so is going to swing it if that person is really keeping the energy and kind of making it this fun dynamic. And I could see the game falling really flat if that isn't done right. And so I agree.
Even if not even just that role, even if the people at the table, if you're just silently placing bets and then just watching, it would be a pretty not great experience. So only other side note, I mean it was obviously an exciting, I don't think we had too many this horse was about to win and then a huge swing. For the most part, they kind of a few pulled ahead, but there was always a little bit of jostling at the end, which was fun. The only other thing I'll mention is with having young children, this one actually worked out kind of well with being able to because everyone's standing at the table at least with ours, we were all kind of standing around the table. And so I know my wife was able to have a kid in one arm and you're placing bets. So I don't know, it's a funny little side positive, but I know for both of us in that stage of life, sometimes games that can sometimes work well with children. I
can tell you what this game was not good for was when I was going through that whole stretch of being sick and losing my voice. Because as running the house, it's the absolute worst game to be playing.
Ryan and his raspy voice.
I tell you, if you've been a regular on Rules in the Family, you've seen my struggles.
Yeah, I know. I'm not linking that video, that's for sure.
The one where
Ryan almost died 3 times to the video. Go try to find it. It's a classic.
Yes. Yes, very nice. It's one I've had success with as well. I definitely am excited to get it to the table.
Yeah, I want to play it this summer at our vacation that we have together. That'd be a great place for it.
Yes.
So. But who's going to run it, Ryan? Who's going to run it? That's
true.
It'll be you.
True.
I know it'll be you.
Probably.
You sick freak. Okay.
Now, you've never played not the house, right? So
that's true. I
have one.
Okay, that's a good argument. So you're not. Yeah, it's not because you're better. It's just
once we do it, it'll become so clear.
Oh, well, okay. Okay. Yeah. Very, very nice. Okay. Yeah.
We're gonna switch gears here a little bit into more the strategic side of the spectrum, and what I would
still
say,
a board game. Okay, good.
Yes, yeah. My favorite movie that no, it's more strategic game. One that has become just an absolute staple for us in the kind of heavier strategic games. This is Terraforming Mars. Terraforming Mars is a game that actually I hadn't played for a while. It's one of those games that I think I'm getting to the table, and then I actually look at the last time I played. It's been 6 months.
A lot of competition for that.
It is, yeah. but I had the opportunity to actually introduce it to two people who had never played it before. We actually played it and then scheduled all of 5 or 6 days later another time to play it. So I actually got to play it twice.
That's the perfect thing to do when you play a game like that with the new people.
Totally, you know? Yeah. Instead of it being like 2 years later, like, you guys remember how to play this game? Yeah. And so that in and of itself was a fun dynamic of this game, was getting to introduce people to this game that I enjoy so much and I knew they probably would enjoy. And they did, which was good. And it was a fun game of it. I mean, obviously we didn't play with drafting or like some of the other expansion stuff. We did play with Prelude, because why wouldn't you have to? Prelude? Yeah. But it was just a good game overall. I actually played a corporation I hadn't played before. I think it was called Vitor. That basically gets credits whenever you play a card that has victory points on it, like the planet with victory points.
Oh, wow.
And so I had like started with some victory points cards, and I was like, okay, I'll lean into this. It's actually a really, I think, tricky corporation to play well, because I think I fell into the trap of going after so many victory point cards. Well, typically the victory point cards are less engine building.
Yeah,
because they're giving you victory points.
Right.
And so I think in the long run, I mean, it wasn't like awful, but I think it actually hurt my strategy, because my engine, I think, got a little behind. Because I got a
maybe
ton
it's maybe
of
not something
points.
You're supposed to like fully literally just play.
It's one of those things, you know how like when you have an ability in a faction in the game and you're like, oh, that's the thing I'm good at, and you just like, if you see an opportunity to go after it, you're like, yeah, instead of being like, okay, the ability is it gives me like 3 credits. Is that worth it? Like in this situation,
I know, you never even consider it. You're just like, I'm gonna do it.
Yeah, it's like, bro, I found another victory point. So that was definitely my takeaway at the end. Was like, I should have been a little bit more like aware of like whether everyone was the opportunity to go after. It was a close game. I actually had one of the new players come out victorious.
Wow.
So, which I think is something to say about the playing without drafting with a new group. It has the potential to even the playing field. Now, obviously, if I was the one to get like some really luck, because it adds more luck into the game. And so there's some swinginess of like, if the more experienced player is the one that gets the swing of the luck, it could be, you know, even more of a gap. But I think in this instance, it helped a little bit, coupled with the fact that I don't think I played mine particularly. I don't think I had a great game of playing. Like I said, some of the mistakes were made, man. But it was a good game, and it's always fun to be able to come out of a game with new players, with them feeling like they were able to be competitive in their first game.
I mean, that's like the number one thing I'm hoping for.
When I'm teaching it, I'm like trying to set people up.
The worst is when the worst is when they do terrible. What's even worse than that is when they do terrible and it's because you taught the game wrong or something. Or they like forgot
I don't do that. Well, I can't relate to that problem, Daniel.
Oh, okay.
Well. Just kidding. Yeah, no, it's hard. It's hard to get all the rules right in these modern board games. We've talked about that. How it's funny how like you wonder what percentage of games played of these bigger, heavier games like get all the rules right, because it's probably more often that at least something was wrong.
Yeah.
It's but yeah, really good time Terraforming Mars. Great to get to the table again. It's just a solid play of a solid game.
I actually feel very similar to what you're saying of like in my mind I play Terraforming Mars a lot, and then I'm like thinking about it, I'm like, man, when was the last time I played Terraforming Mars, you know?
Yeah.
Because it's one we love, and so I'm gonna get Terraforming
Mars. We both got Prelude 2 coming at some point this year.
Yeah, when is that coming?
That'll get.
I love it. I love this new model where you buy things and you just forget, and then it shows up on your door, and you're like, "Oh yeah."
So, love is a strong word, but
yeah.
But you know, it'll be exciting when it comes here and give us an excuse to get us to the table.
There you go. Okay, coming over to my number 2 of March, Ryan. I think this pick is going to compromise the integrity of our channel.
Okay.
People are going to think we have been paid off, that we work for this publisher or designer, because we seem to be just the biggest stands of this game, maybe in the world. But my number 2 is going to go to Agricola. Now you want to know something funny? Ryan and I do not just say, "Hey, which one of us is going to play Agricola so we can talk about it in the video each month." we don't do that, I promise. But actually, the funny thing was, my wife and I had not played Agricola in forever. Like,
had you played it since I played it with you?
We
guys?
didn't play it since we played it with you, and it blew our minds. It was a travesty.
I mean, I guess you've had some life events happen since then, but
I mean, I suppose, but yeah, it was honestly shocking, and especially because we had just gotten the revised edition with all. The revised edition is just incredible. I love it so much, and so the fact that we haven't played it since, we were like, we got to get it to the table, and so it was perfect. Someone was able to. This was actually the perfect scenario where we were just talking about before this video. We do a date swap with another couple, and so the other couple was watching our kids and playing a strategic board game when kids are not around versus when they are is it's a very different experience and much better. So we were able to just like focus in and have an awesome 2-player game of Agricola. Interesting thing, we actually tried for the first time playing with the father and mother cards. Where at the beginning of the game,
in the, I think it's in the CD expansion, deck expansion adds those.
Yep. So at the start of the game, you I think get dealt 2 father cards and 2 mother cards. And you pick one of each to keep. The mother card is essentially just like kind of an initial, almost think like Prelude, in Terraforming Mars, just like you get something.
But isn't it like a certain round or something?
Yeah. So for example, I think mine was in like round, it was like 2 or 3, I got to place a stable or something like that. And then the father card is like a conditional thing of if you do this, and usually there's like levels to it. So if you have like 1, 3, or 5 of this, flip this card and get this or something like that. And mine was to allow me to like play an improvement. I'm not even sure I used that one in the game. So it's very small.
It's subtle,
but it does.
Which it would have to be.
Yeah,
Agricola is so tightly tuned.
Yeah.
Like you don't want to throw it way off.
Well, and Ryan's just the guy that he is. I had a really good game. I put up one of my top scores. I think I was in the 60s, I believe, like 64 maybe. Mm-hmm. And then the first thing Ryan replies with is, "Well, you were playing with those father and mother cards."
Yeah, I gave you extra boost there.
The extra boost. I'm like, Ryan, it maybe got me like 1 point.
Hey, getting a stable in like round 4, that could be a game changer.
Yeah. But no, it was, I was playing it. I just was saying to Kaylee, I'm like, I love this game so much. I had some really fun cards. I had one that allowed me to keep an animal in every room of my house, which was awesome. So I quickly was pushing to expand my house and whatnot. And then part of my food strategy that was really cool was I had these 2 cards. One, I think this was the first occupation I played. If I at the start of a round, if I have a resource in an upcoming round, so like one that I'm still waiting to receive in a future round, I get a food immediately. So like every time there's a resource ahead, I can get a food at the start of the round immediately. And then I had another card where anytime I take sheep, I can put a food on the next 2 rounds.
Okay, and so
essentially, anytime I took sheep, I get 2 food on the next 2 rounds.
But then that allows you to get 2 food.
Well,
in the rounds leading up,
one
right?
on the next. Well, it would put a food on the next round and a food in the round after that. But then each of those times, not only do I get that food, but at the start of the round, I get a food because there's a resource. Yep. Yeah. So I'm getting 2 food like every round off this weird thing of like taking sheep, which was, just a really funny kind of little thing that I'm doing. And it actually worked out really well. But it was just such a great game. And we always say one of the things we really love about Agricola, and I think some of the pictures that I'll have here kind of show it, is especially when you have a good game, like probably more so than most games, the finished product of like where you started to the end is so satisfying. You just look at this farm and it's like, wow.
And especially, were you playing with Farmers of the Moor?
Well, of course, right?
Yeah, I assume so.
No other
I
way
actually recently, some of my Agricola games recently have not been with it because I've been playing with
Farmers
new people.
of the Moor is incredible.
But I think that is another thing that makes the end game even better is because you really get different looking farms because of where the forest, and you might even have like a leftover forest or more tile, and
Agricola just absolutely blows me away that it can be that much fun but deliver every time. I think that's the thing for me. It's like we have games that are incredibly fun, but and have incredible highs. But maybe there's like a lot of I'm thinking like an Eldritch Horror, obviously. Like there's a lot of variability.
Even something like Terraforming Mars, I feel like is more swingy.
Yeah.
And not really swingy, but I think Agricola just really. I cannot remember the last time I had a bad game of Agricola. Like honestly,
you're not talking performance wise.
Yeah, well, usually the last time I can think of I would have bad was just like I was disappointed in how I did with things, but it wasn't like the fault of the game. Like it just is rock solid.
Yeah. So it was a blast, and honestly, it's interesting. The mother and father cards, I kind of am like, I might just play with them every time because guess what? It's another variable thing that is cool. And it's like,
I definitely want to, I haven't tried it yet.
Like, obviously this isn't, it's something that you would only play with people who have played Agricola as much as we, a lot and are very comfortable with everything, that adding another thing. But it's like, hey, you want another choice of variability that makes things interesting? Here you go. So I'm all for it.
Yeah. Very nice. I'll have to give it a try. It's always hard with a game that you love so much and have played so much to make a decision of like, what is my preferred way to play? Yeah. Like, do I want this to be the new?
Now I don't like that it does boost the score very slightly, but it just,
so it's harder to compare to all our past data.
I know.
Oh well. Nice. Onwards to my number 2, which is a game that's in a short list of games that you owned before I owned. It's not a long list of ones that fall into that category. It was one that I played with you, enjoyed it, and then over time, just the more I thought about it, the more I realized it kind of filled something I didn't really have and that I was kind of looking for. This is going to be Cthulhu Death May Die. I finally decided to pick it up, got it to the table.
I need to play this one again.
Even more than the game that I played with you, now coming in, having played it before, having read the rules and taught it myself, I was just like, this really nails a specific thing I was looking for, which is really the one-off dungeon crawl. Like, I want to play I don't want a campaign. I just want to be able to get a group together and play a one-off. And, it happens to be the Cthulhu theme, which we enjoy. We think it works well for cooperative games.
Yep.
But honestly, I think just the way the game is structured and the mechanics lend itself to being what I want out of that kind of one-off dungeon crawl. So one is just the upfront variability of like, pick a scenario, pick an elder one, you smash them together, and that gives you this unique experience. There's a lot of different things you can mix and match together. Then there's all the variability with the characters, and it's fun to give out your characters and have different abilities. But the actual core systems of the game, I am so impressed by how streamlined they are. I mean, this is like when you explain to like a new player, like these are the actions, they're all like so straightforward.
Oh, yeah.
It's like you can move, and if you move, you just get to like move 3 spaces. And so like it's just very, there's like no friction with like me engaging with the game. I kind of just like know what I can do, and it just becomes the game in the situations. And I love that it also, for example, that travel action, it's 3 spaces. It's like really easy to move really far if you want to. And I think that just like helps the game. Like there's less friction to do what you want to do. It's not like, okay, if I move a little bit this turn, I'll be closer next turn so that I can do this thing. And so I just like that everything in the game like embraces this ethos of cut to the chase, like just like get to the parts that you actually want to do. And so, yeah, we had a fun game. We were playing Haster. It was the Elder one. And it was a scenario that I'm guessing you've played, where basically you had to like defeat cultists, and then you would like loot their bodies to try to find these tomes. If you found two tomes that had the same symbol, you can go to like that location to, I can't remember exactly thematically what was happening. But you had to like do that twice, which was just a nice, little setup. But like, the system just creates for interesting tactical situations. The fact that you can manipulate monsters pretty easily because of the rule that they always follow you. Yeah. So like there's a lot of like team dynamic of like, oh, I could like pull all these guys over here. Right. So that you guys can go do something. I'm going to
storm through and just take them with me.
And it's kind of like at times it's a little goofy, like as far as like what's actually happening. Like they all just like chase me out of the room. But it does create just kind of like some interesting situations. I also absolutely love the decision in this game that there's a mythos. I think they call it a mythos after every player's turn. Whereas a lot of other cooperative games follow the model of everyone takes a turn, then it's a game turn. I think because they do that in this game, it's so much more dynamic of what happens because the opposition is doing things so much more often and things are happening and changing. But I think they did a good job of like, they typically only really negatively impact the current player, or at least they're much more likely to. So it's not like you're falling into this situation where it's like, as it's going around the table, you're just getting hammered by things happening on other people's turns. Yeah. But I think it's just so much more fun and dynamic when it's just like player, opposition, back and forth.
Well, you know what's interesting about that is, I don't know if you remember, I'm pretty sure that's the big difference between when we played Descent, the dungeon crawler, and now me having Imperial Assault, is if I remember correctly, in Descent, it was when we played a campaign of that, you all as the heroes like did all your things, all of your actions.
You might be right. It's digging into my memory.
And then, and so if we're wrong here, but I'm pretty sure that was the big change, was then when it's Imperial Assault, you go one character, one Imperial character, one Rebel character. So I loved it because it was much more of this like, you felt that kind of dynamic back and forth. So it kind of reminds me of that.
Yeah, no, and I think it really works well here. And honestly, in these types of cooperative Cthulhu type games, like that enemy turn of like bad things are going to happen is one of the fun parts of the game, is like what's going to happen. And so you just get a lot more like frequent touch points of that. But yeah, I just, obviously the presentation is really cool. Like it's fun to pull out as much as it's like over the top a little bit. It's fun to have this giant, I can't remember what the giant thing was on our map that was kind of the biggest of the normal monsters that was chasing us around. But it just looks, it looks cool. And it's fun
in that
moving
type of game,
and
like I don't think it's unnecessary. Like I actually think it's trying to create this feel of the scale correlates to the, how terrified you should be of the thing.
What's unnecessary is, I don't know if you've seen the, what is it? The Fear of the Giant Cthulhu Kickstarter expansion for this. It's literally like a 4-foot Cthulhu.
Okay, well
it's massive, and you like play a scenario with it. That's over the top. Cool Mini or Not needs to chill a little bit on that.
Watch when Ryan owns it in a year.
Yeah. Nah. It's like $150 for like one scenario.
Oh my god.
No, but I agree. I love that it has these cool minis, and they are very well done, and it just looks cool, and like the whole presentation works really well.
It'd be cool to paint them.
And all of this, all these benefits we're talking about, and we finished it in under an hour and a half. And like, that's just like, perfect. Man, exactly what I'm looking for. There's times where maybe we want that kind of cooperative experience, but like Eldritch Horror is a 3-hour game. This you can pretty much count on being, an hour and a half or less. Right. So,
and I would say I've had Eldritch Horror games that have flopped, and that's a long time to flop. Whereas like, I feel like this one is, at least from my experience, most games have been really consistent. You know, again, when you streamline it like that, and I don't know, I just find it escalates really well. It almost every game I've had finishes, you know, with this climax at the end of, and it feels tight. Yeah, no, I love how you're just dropped right in, and there is just no messing around. You immediately are just going, and it's like, it's fast, it's dynamic,
lots of rolling a dice, and it only scales as the game goes on. I love you start the game with like your, what do they call it, a madness condition or something?
Yes,
which is like your unique thing that whenever you hit one of those sanity thresholds, which you like hitting because you get to upgrade your abilities or get more dice. Good. But in addition, you have to trigger your, you know, bad thing. So for example, mine was, what's the word for loves fire? It's just completely pyromaniac.
Yeah, I think it's that.
So basically every time I would do that, I would create a fire in my space, which fire, like anytime you leave fire, you like, and so what's so interesting about that whole madness mechanic is everybody knows what everybody's is. And you can actually strategize around it. So you can be like, you know, it's better for me. Like, I think another one of the players had this one that like every monster would move towards him. Well, you can use that very strategically. If he goes somewhere and like intentionally hits a sanity threshold in a way that it's going to actually pull people away. So I think that's a great little decision. It's like negative, but you can like twist it to your benefit.
Again, I mean, I'm pulling all these game references here. This is why we like Mechs versus Minions, right? The negative, we talk about how we love when a negative thing can actually be used in like a really fun way, and you like work with it, and it's a similar thing with that. So
totally. So very impressed by this one. It's one that, and even with just the base game, I technically picked up the base game in one extra Elder one. So I have 3 Elder ones, 6 scenarios.
So I think we have the same. I think
we might have exactly the same stuff.
I think we have the exact.
Yeah.
Or actually, I think I have one more Elder one. I think I have 4.
Yeah, you might be right. But that's a lot to work with, and I know there's more content. You know, I would love to get the season 2 that adds 6 more scenarios.
Yeah,
because the scenarios really, even more than the other ones, breathe variety into it.
I know, but it is insane with just the core. I mean, core box. Like, let's just say all you get is the core box. You've got 2 Elder ones and 6 scenarios. That's 12 unique experiences, but here's the deal:
all replayable.
They're all like you could have this one, and you could just play. I mean, that would probably get a little, you know, but you can play the same
as long
scenario.
As you like cycle through them. Like, you know, you'll be back
fine.
To it, and you're gonna have different investigators with different madness, and like the discovery cards for any given scenario can come out in a different order, and that changes what items and things you get.
The discovery cards are cool.
Yeah, it's a cool mechanism. So yeah, high praise for this one, and one that I honestly see myself expanding in my collection and just being. I don't have another game that's quite in that same cat. It doesn't really compete with much in my collection as far as like kind of more hour and a half cooperative.
When a game doesn't compete with much and there's a bunch of expansions, that's called a strategy for money going out of my wallet.
Yes.
Okay,
there you go.
Well, that is, oh man, gosh, I need to play that one again. You just talking about it, I'm like, that game is incredible. Yes. Okay, let's bring it home here, Ryan, with the numero uno, number 1 of March. This was actually tough to not put Agricola there, because that's how much fun I had with it. But I got to pretty much, I think, have the like prime experience of this game. This was my first time being able to play this game with the full number of players that it can support. And it just went over wonderfully. And this is going to go to Earth. So I got to
so you had 6 players for...
Oh, JK.
Or is it 5? I think it's the expansion that's going to add a 6th. That's why 6 is in my head.
Okay. I was like, I thought I played it.
So you played at the full of what you have.
I played at 5.
Continue.
Yeah, so we had a 5-player... Game of Earth, and this was kind of a group that I've gamed with some of them. Some of them haven't really played game, you know, a lot of like strategic games outside of like Catan before, and so it's like trying to find kind of a nice blend. And I tell you what, when you're picking a game that has simultaneous, where like you're engaged the entire game, like you are in Earth, with kind of every time you're taking an action and everyone else is triggering stuff is a very appealing pick because, you know, there's no, I'll say this about Earth. I'm not sure I have played a kind of Euro game like this where I am as mentally in the game for the entire
you never, which
time.
It's funny. I actually read some people online that for them specifically, it was actually a negative because they never had any time to breathe mentally.
I mean,
like they actually, and I could see that actually being for someone. I mean, it is like constant.
This is how I describe it. Is like the game is not that long. You know, I mean, I want to say for us, you know, it was new and stuff, so maybe it was a couple hours. But it's like mentally, you're doing like double the time, and that's like what's happening mentally in terms of how because you are just thinking all the time of just triggering.
And a lot of it is just like fun, like seeing your stuff work, and like it's not necessarily it's super crunchy, but it is pretty constant.
Yeah, just all the time. Okay, here, trigger this. Okay, boom, boom, boom. Next person. Okay, you're triggering this. Okay, right. You know, it's which for me is a positive because it just I find, you know, value to the time ratio is just fantastic. I mean, when my wife and I play 2-player, we can knock this thing out in like, you know, like an hour or something, and it feels like I've played a 2.5 hour game. So we had a full group of 5, and the other thing is with some new people, this game I think taught it wasn't too bad with teaching. I like games where the actions are very simple. You know, it's just like, hey, there's 4 actions. It's kind of like the Wingspan model of the actions are simple, but then it's learning. Probably, you know, the hardest part with it is just learning iconography and stuff like that. Although once you know kind of get going, it's pretty. You can learn it pretty fast. Though probably the hardest part for new players is, I mean, it's hard for me, and still is the start of the game, the very start, where it's just like, oh my gosh. Okay.
When
so
you get all these cards that, you know, you're not quite used to parsing all the iconography yet. I mean, it's similar to Terraforming Mars in that regard, where like you teach a new player everything, and then it's like, okay, now the first thing you get to do to interact with this game is going to be probably the most overwhelming moment of here's a bunch of cards and you have to like make some decisions like right off the bat.
So I don't love get over the hump. New players. Yeah. Because once you get going, then you could kind of like after that initial thing, and then we kind of start taking actions, and it's like, okay, here we go. Now I can kind of manage what I'm doing. But there is a lot to think about in it. You know, between the public objectives, where you're placing your, you know, how you're placing your cards, the environment cards that score at the end of the game. I would say, honestly, for new players, it probably does feel a little like I can't do all of it. And maybe I think that's just part of the realization is you can't optimize everything. So you have to kind of pick and choose where are my points of optimization. But I have really loved this one. It feels very different in that it, you know, obviously we really love Race for the Galaxy for having a similar, you know, the similar mechanic of you trigger one action, but just things happening all the time. But to have that experience in a bigger game is incredibly satisfying. The other thing I love about it is the whole 4x4 grid and how just like, how do I optimize everything? Not only for running the engine, but also scoring oftentimes will be like, okay, things in this column, things, you know, so it's really, really interesting. You know,
I like the decision that like you never are committed to where a card is in that 4x4 grid. Like your first card could end up being the top left or the bottom right, depending on which way.
You just never can exceed the parameters.
It's kind of like the you know, King Domino is a game kind of like that, where it's like you're kind of building out and you can't get bigger than 5x5, but like until you define that, you and I think it does work well, and I think it couples really well with the design decision that you execute. You execute from top to bottom.
Yeah.
Because then that order does matter for like execution of abilities and stuff.
Yeah. You know, it's really, as you were saying that, it's really funny that you can tell I don't fully understand that, because I've realized whenever I place my first card, I think about what I'm doing when I shouldn't be thinking at all, because like your first card, it literally doesn't matter, because
it could literally be anywhere.
It could literally be like, I'll like mentally be
your
like,
second card
the second card matters, but the first one I'll be like, okay, where am I? And it's like, Daniel, what are you doing?
Yeah.
So I'm having a lot of fun with this one. I will say there are like some you know, some of the things with new players, it's like, okay, that's a lot. I think, yeah, just managing the amount of it's not one that I think everyone's gonna love. Like, I don't think this is like an insanely like just this is one I just whip out no matter you know, no matter who it is, because, and I have actually had experience with playing this with someone who it was just kind of like, I think they felt that it was a lot of, I mean, this game's a ton of just little like, okay, get this to do this, and there's just points there's just points, you know, just it's a point salad just everywhere, and you kind of are just like, okay, what am I, you know, sometimes some people might feel, okay, what am I even doing? Am I doing
what really
good?
matters?
I think, you know, one thing to realize, it's even though other people are triggering actions for you, you have no idea how other people are doing. Like, you are so locked into the
closest you get to it is like, oh, Daniel's got some tall growths over there.
Or you notice someone's close to ending the game. Like, that's really the extent of what you're paying attention to. But when we got to final scoring, we had absolutely no idea who won. Which, you know, some people might like that, some might not.
It's a very multiplayer solitaire game.
Yeah.
Like, you could have, instead of other players going, like, roll a die to determine which action other players and you'd have almost the same experience.
Yeah, I wonder what the solo experience, it probably is.
Yeah, it probably plays well.
Something like that. So I'm having a lot of fun with it. It's going to be interesting, just, you know, as every game, long term, you know, how does playing it more and more.
That's kind of where I'm at, because this is on like my radar, and I think I want to like play it again since you have it. But like the question I feel like I need to answer is like, I know I like it, but do I think it's a game I want to play 50 times, 100 times? Because that's with that type of game, those are the types of things we're looking for. Is the type of game that we just want to play again and again and again and again. And I like don't know for sure yet. Now I know they're expanding it, which certainly has the potential to help on that front. And I'm less worried about the variety. Like, the game has tons of variety with cards, but the variety is like within this like band of pretty limited types of things. Like, all the variety is kind of variations on the same thing. There's not a lot of like, you know, when you were talking about your Agricola game, and it's like, oh, I had this really interesting occupation that did this thing different. Here it's like, I was better at making sprouts this time.
The cards don't excite you much.
Yeah, it's like the systems they create that like are
it's
interesting.
Not about the individual cards. It's about fitting them within that whole system. And I agree well,
I was going to say, I'll be intrigued to see how they approach expanding it. Like, do they lean a little bit more into some exotic things, or do they kind of keep it where it's at? But
so it'll be interesting. But the fact that you can the simultaneous play with a full group of 5 and it still played quick and stuff, I had an absolute blast. So it was a good time. That is my numero uno.
Numero uno. Mine is one that had been way too long that I hadn't gotten it to the table. But it is one that I have a harder time getting to the table, because there's not a lot of people in my gaming groups that like it as much as I do. Which a lot of times there's other games where like you are included in that.
No.
This is Troyes.
Oh my god!
And it had been, I think, a year and a half since I had played Troyes. And every time I play this game, I come away with the same feelings about it, of really, really enjoying it. I played it with one new player who had never played it before and one that had. And for the record, the new player, after the game, said that it was probably his favorite of new games that I had introduced to him recently. And like he was like,
what was the other game you
buying it.
introduced to him? Uno?
No, he played quite a few new solid ones. So I was given hope that there's some people in this world with a good taste for games like Trois.
Okay.
But Trois is just this fascinating combination of this interesting dice drafting mechanism where you kind of own certain dice, or like they're in your district, but you can make groups using dice from any district. You just have to pay people based on the size of your group. And so it can be very expensive if you're trying to make big groups of dice. Big meaning 3 is the most. It's 1 to 3 dice. But then you're sending these dice to go take actions, and a lot of the actions that you take trigger a number of times based on like the total of the dice that you're sending. So it might be like this action triggers for every 4 pips on the dice. And so there's just a lot of like big play potential as you try to set up get a big group of dice to throw through something. But then the fact that the activity cards, which are a lot of what are those abilities, are randomized every game. So there's always 9 completely different ones. And those so change the strategic landscape of like what you're trying to do to ultimately get points. And I just find it super satisfying. So for example, my kind of strategy in this is I leaned into this card that had the potential to give you money. And the way it gave you money was every time you triggered it, you got a coin for every cube you had in the cathedral. And so the cathedral is another place you can send white dice to kind of like contribute to it. And there's kind of a thing at the end of the game that you want to be on every level to avoid losing points. And so I was like, okay, I'll hit the cathedral hard early, then lean into this as a money strategy so I can be doing that for money, because money is super powerful because it's how you buy other people's dice. So if you're super rich, you can really just buy lots of dice and make good groups. Well, what's also interesting with the activity cards is they're revealed over time. So you don't know what's coming up. And by the third round, those activity cards almost always are point scoring cards. So that third round, suddenly you see options for what could be my way to funnel some of this into more points. And there was a really interesting one that came up that I'd never seen before. I think it was called Banker, that it was just, if you have 30 money, it gave you, I think, 3 points or something like that. You don't have to pay the money. You just have to have the money. And so I had a lot of money from this other strategy. So I was like, that could be a good thing to go after. Because unlike some of the other really big scoring plays where you have to pay a bunch and then to set it up again, you'd have to go and get resources and do stuff to go do it again. Here, you could potentially do that every round because you're not losing anything to do it as long as you hold on to your 30 money. So that was just interesting how that worked out for me. Unfortunately for me, there was another player that was also going for that. So we were kind of fighting a little bit over the same dice for that action. But then to contrast that, the other player was doing a completely different strategy where there are certain activity cards where when you activate them, you just put cubes on them. And then those are cubes that you can spend at any time to do that ability in the future. So you're kind of stocking up, which again is so huge for setting up those big combos. And so he had one that every cube he put on there was basically a red 6 die that he could use in a group later. So he's just stocking red 6s, which is very powerful. And then he was using this other red activity card called Chivalry, where every time you activate it, you get to put a cube out for every red die in your district. And so it's weird because you want as many red dice in your district as possible, so you're getting more cubes per activation, but you have to activate it with red dice. So it's this weird thing of you want to send a lot of red dice, but I want to be leaving red dice. Well, obviously that worked great with his stocking red 6s on that other card because he could use that to leave red dice. So that was a really good strategy he had there and was doing stuff on the events. And so I just love how varied those can be and how varied they are from game to game. We ended up having a very close game. I squeaked it out by 2 points. But it's also in that category of a game that plays in closer to an hour and a half. So it's a level down from a lot of what we talk about as our favorite strategy games that are in this longer category. And for me in that hour and a half, I just love it. I think the interest of the puzzle of the dice and the drafting and what's the order I need to do things based on what other people are going to want to do. And then just the satisfaction of setting things up of I'm going to store some cubes here so that I can later go here with this huge thing that's going to trigger it 5 times and do something. Yeah, it's one that is really unique, and I can see why it doesn't appeal to everybody.
Well, yeah, Ryan, why do you think it doesn't appeal to me as much?
I'm actually a little surprised it doesn't appeal to you more, and maybe it would with more plays. Awful. Yeah, but so is Lorenzo. Like, there's other games where the theme isn't like, and actually, I think the theme in Troyes is better than people probably give it credit for. Like, you look at it and you think the theme's bad, but all the activity cards, like, if you think about what it's doing, it's kind of funny. Like,
maybe I'll try that next time.
Yeah, maybe that's what you're missing. No, yeah, no, I think for me, just the uniqueness of it, the combo nature of it, the fact that it just really like. It feels like the game doesn't like cap you. Like there's the potential for just these like really game breaking plays. Mm-hmm. And I think that's just a fun space to play in. So hopefully I'll find enough people. I guess I've got like a few people I know that like this game.
I mean, that's all you need.
I just got to like intentionally like get it to the table with those.
And in some ways it's kind of nice. Then when you have them together, you know what you're playing.
Yeah, it helps. And then Daniel doesn't feel like he has to play it when.
Oh gosh, I know. Yeah, I know. I'm trying to think if it was because this is the one with the shared, like the dice are in the center and you're.
And maybe that's what you don't like about it, because I remember you didn't like in Keyflower.
Oh, don't get me started about.
You didn't like in Keyflower how you would get your own things, but then other people could come use it.
Where you spend all this time building up this beautiful thing for yourself. And then other people just come and take it the rest of the game, and you can't use it. Tell me, is that something like
you just had the wrong expectations? But I could see that being I mean, I try to really teach it well in Troyes that like, don't think of them as your dice. Think of them as the dice that are cheaper to you because you don't have to pay to use them. And so like you can change during the game like what your distribution is by getting into those buildings so that you get more of those dice. Mm-hmm. But yeah, it is more of like, this is the landscape of all the dice that were rolled. Ones for other players are going to cost you, and other players are going to be looking at yours. What's the order? There's some really clever things you can do with dice manipulation. Like there's the, you can use 4 influence to flip up to 3 of your dice. So if you rolled bad and got like 1s and 2s, you can turn those into 5s and 6s. But you can do some interesting things where like, oh, I rolled low. I'll just leave those for a while because they're probably not going to get stolen, because people aren't going to pay me for these really low ones. And then at the end of the round, I'll flip them into really powerful dice and then use them somewhere. So, I think it's just like the core mechanism, that core like system for actions is really, really solid and interesting. And then you funnel that into this like infinite variety of like setting up big combos and like looking for opportunities. And it just, I don't know. I really like how it comes together.
Yeah, no, I think even just reflection upon myself, I don't like, because I feel like it's the same thing with Keyflower. I'm not a huge fan.
Keyflower is way more mean.
Well, but it's not even just it's I don't know, something about the shared. We're all, I don't know, something about that. So
maybe it's you don't like having your like plan. You were planning to use this, and then somebody else used it. And now you gotta kind of
that's horrible. But not horrible for Ryan. It was his number one. And I'm glad that you have at least 2 people in your life that will play it with you. So you're not hopeless, because if you didn't,
my kids are what, like 5? That's old enough for 12.
They're gonna be big.
Raise them in
fans.
the way. Raise them in the way.
At least teach them how to pronounce it right. It's not.
Troyes.
Yes. Well, there you go, Ryan. What a wonderful month. How about March? Wasn't that a great one? Hopefully April brings even better gaming for us. But that is our top 3 plays of March 2024.
Hey, thanks for tuning in and listening to our top plays. Hopefully it was interesting to hear what's been hitting the table for us lately. The links are all down below if you want to check them out. And we also have some other videos here. We have a playlist of all of these top plays videos that we do every single month, as well as another video, and we will see you in the next one.